It's every basketball player's dream as a kid to make it to the NBA, playing on the biggest stage, the brightest lights, and reaching the pinnacle of your craft. And while the fame and all the glory that comes with it, a big reason that drives a lot of young basketball players to reach the highest professional basketball league in the world is the money. And boy, do NBA players get it. They make a lot of money. In fact, NBA basketball players are the highest paid athletes of any major sport, with an average salary of around $9.8 million a year. You compare that to Major League Baseball, that has an average salary of near half that of $4.9 million, the NFL with an average salary of $2 million, and the NHL with an average salary of $3.5 million. The amount of money NBA players make in a year is more than some of us will ever see in a lifetime over the course of our working careers. Call it fair or unfair, overpaid athletes to play a sport, but the fact of the matter is these guys generate a lot of revenue with their play and entertainment. The NBA brings in over $10 billion in revenue every season between ticket sales, merchandise, TV deals, and without the players, the league would be nothing. But what if I told you the growing pay disparity among NBA players, particularly under the new CBA parameters, could present a huge problem for the future of the league and the Players Association fighting back on the increasing wealth gap between those players that make very little, relatively speaking of course, to those who are making over 40 times the amount of their peers? Well, that's what we'll be talking about in this video. As always, if you're new to the channel and you like this type of content, it would mean a great deal to me if you subscribed, and in return I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Remember back in 2016 when Mike Conley signed the richest deal in NBA history, a 5-year contract at $153 million? Most have probably forgotten about it because it seems like a fairly inconsequential deal by today's NBA standards, but at the time, people could not believe that Mike Conley, yes, a great player and critical player to the Memphis Grizzlies, but was never an all-star, wasn't a box office level player that brought in huge ticket sales, could be the highest paid player in the NBA, where he would be making over $25 million per year, more than guys like LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry at the time. But it quickly didn't matter because every passing offseason, a new contract given out would set the record for the richest deal in NBA history. And this offseason, for the first time, we saw our first $300 million contract when the Boston Celtics signed Jaylen Brown to a 5-year supermax deal. Jaylen Brown, starting in the 24-25 season, will be making close to $50 million a year, and by the final year of his deal in 2029, will be making over $65 million. As insane as that might seem, a new contract next offseason will set the record for the largest deal in history after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. But what's more shocking is not the insanely high salaries of the league's best players, but rather those NBA players, still some of the best athletes in the world and at the top of their craft playing in the best league on the planet, are getting paid 96% less than the highest paid players in the league, in the same league for which they play. The rookie minimum salary in the NBA is set just a little under $1 million per year at $953,000. The veteran minimum, depending on the number of years of experience, can range from $1.5 million all the way to $2.7 million for a player who has been in the league for over 10 years. It's still an insane amount of money when you compare it to the median salary of people working in the US at $89,000 per year, but it's a massive disparity between what you would call, I guess, the top 1% in the league and the middle to lower class of the NBA, which is odd to say because all NBA players at their salaries are in the top 1% of earnings in the nation. But we'll put that aside for now. Here's the thing. Take a look at this chart put out by the NBA. Of the 440 currently signed players in the league, 38% of them make less than $4 million per year, and 65% of them make less than $10 million. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise that you see a dip in terms of the number of players at each salary range. Naturally, there are going to be higher level players that get paid more because of the amount of attention they garner to the league and the revenue that they bring in. And those types of players are few and far between. But what is surprising is the increase in the number of players making 30+ million at 44. You would expect to see this number go down as the salary ranges go up. So why is that? Well, enter the new world of the NBA salary cap, birds' rights, luxury tax thresholds, and the new CBA. And I'll try to describe it in as basic terms as possible so as not to bore you guys, but essentially, teams are incentivized to keep their top players by being able to pay them the most money and being able to have their salary go over the cap because they own their bird rights. And for a player who's an all-star or an all-NBA player, they're generally going to get the max the team is able to offer to ensure they're able to retain them. It's why you see players like Mike Conley or more recently Jaylen Brown get these huge deals because while they may not be a top 10 player in the NBA, their team isn't left with much choice than extending them for a big contract rather than losing them in free agency, or lowballing them and causing friction in the relationship when the player knows the max amount that they are able to get. And because of that, you see a concentration of insanely high salaries at the top and less of a focus on the middle to upper middle salaries. As the other issue with the new CBA is teams are disincentivized to spend high sums of money, not only because they would have to pay the luxury tax, but also paying a penalty by going over a certain threshold in the luxury tax where you lose your mid-level exception and ability to trade draft picks a certain number of years out into the future. So after paying out these high salaries, teams are now faced with a situation where they need to fill out the rest of their roster, but with little money left over to do so. Thus, in comes vet minimum deals that are handed out throughout the league, and ultimately players are forced to take because teams, simply put, do not have the money to give them more than that. Austin Rivers said it best in a recent podcast interview he did, talking about how under the new CBA, players are either getting paid $40 million a year or $2 million. There's very few in between that of those players that are getting paid in that middle range and also getting paid their fair market value. Look, there is no question that some players should be getting paid more than others in the NBA. When you're one of the best players in the league and people pay large sums of money to come see you play live, and you specifically, you should be getting more than your teammates. But should you be getting paid 20 times, 30 times, even 40 times more than your peers when you play the same game in the same league? Should guys like Bradley Beal be getting paid 20 times as much as Josh Okogie or Yuta Watanabe, who play on the same team? I think we all can agree Bradley Beal is a better player, a bigger name, but is he 20 times the player Okogie or Watanabe are? And I know some of you are probably asking by now, well, what's the issue here? Yeah, there is a large pay gap between vet min players and those who are on max contracts, so what? That's always been the case. And while yes, the disparity between the league minimum salary has always differed greatly between max contracts, the fact of the matter is, we're seeing it more and more, this widening gap where salaries are now concentrated much more on the lower end and more on the higher end, with fewer salaries in those mid-level ranges. And the reason this is a problem is because eventually, as teams navigate and learn the implications of their spending under the new CBA, you're going to see this gap grow even further. More minimum deals or biannual exception deals, lower contract offers, and then more max and supermax contracts to retain their best players. That will further perpetuate this pay gap and inequality between the players, who all have egos. They've all been the best of the best throughout their time playing basketball before heading into the NBA. They're playing alongside these guys who they know are making 20 to 30x more than they are. They see that just like them, they are human and sometimes make mistakes on the court. And in some instances, some of the lower paid players end up proving to be more impactful than those who are on max contracts. Think of guys like Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, or in the past when Chandler Parsons received a max contract, or Rashard Lewis, Steve Francis, guys who were sitting on max money but clearly were not the best player on their team, and even at certain points in their contract, they were unplayable. And so when you have all of these egos, this sense of pride, and you want to get your fair share of the billions of dollars coming into the league, it's eventually going to create tension among the players. It's eventually going to create tension among the Players Association, and it's possible it could get to the point where the players, really the 65% of players in the league that are making less than a third of what some of the top are making, are going to start to protest. They're going to start to become more vocal about it, and you're going to start seeing the impact on the overall quality of the play on the court. Think of it this way. In your own job, if you felt you were underpaid relative to your employees, maybe some of them were at a higher level than you, but not a considerable difference in terms of their overall skill and experience, and you found out that they were getting paid 20 to 30 times the amount you were, yeah, you would have a hard time performing your job at the highest level. You might even love your job and you'll do whatever you can to work harder to receive a promotion to get to that level, but it's defeating knowing there are limited opportunities to be able to get there. And that's what it's become in the NBA. For a lot of players, they've had to start settling for pay below their value because of the way the salary cap is structured, and they're not going to have many opportunities for advancement when these large contracts are all concentrated for the elite of the elite, and there's little middle ground to work with in between. So is there a situation in which players could start to revolt, protest, or strike until they see a better balance in pay among players? I don't think we're quite there yet, but if this trend continues, that we've seen in the past few years in the pay gap between players, I wouldn't be surprised to see it happen. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think this is an issue that could impact the league heavily in the near future? Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.